Hello, dreadful family. Halloween, the one night when the line between the living and the dead disappears. Some say the stories you hear tonight are just that, stories. But every year someone new comes forward and swearing theirs was real. These are 3 true Halloween encounters that were never meant to be heard. Halloween has always been my favorite night of the year, not for the candy or the parties, but for the feeling. That quiet electricity in the air when the sun goes down, like the world becomes thinner and things that shouldn't exist start to slip through. I was 22 when this happened. It was 2018, and I'd just moved into a small one-bedroom house in upstate New York. The place was cheap, too cheap, but it sat at the edge of a neighborhood that came alive every Halloween. Dozens of kids, glowing pumpkins, laughter echoing down the streets. I figured it'd be a good way to feel like part of the community again. By 7:30 p.m., I'd handed out nearly 2 full bowls of candy. I was about to turn off the porch light when I noticed a lone trick-or-treater across the street, standing completely still. He wore a plain, pale white mask. No expression, no design, just blank. He wasn't moving toward any houses, just standing there watching. I chuckled to myself, probably a teenager trying to be edgy. But after 10 minutes, when the street was empty and he still hadn't moved, the laughter in my throat turned cold. I decided to call it a night. I turned off the porch light, locked the door, and went to the kitchen to clean up. From the window above the sink, I could still see him, standing under the streetlight, head slightly tilted, mask pointed right at my house. When I checked again 5 minutes later, he was gone. That should have been the end of it. But around 9:15, I heard knocking. Not the usual trick-or-treat kind of knock. Slow, deliberate. 3 heavy thuds that shook the door. I hesitated, peeking through the peephole. There he was, the same mask, standing motionless on my porch. At that point, I was more annoyed than scared. I shouted, "Hey man, Halloween's over. Go bug someone else." No answer, just silence. Then slowly he tilted his head exactly like before. Something about that movement made my skin crawl. I grabbed my phone to record, but before I could hit record, he turned and walked off. Not ran, walked, into the shadows. When I opened the door to check, the street was completely empty again. Around 11:45, I was in bed scrolling through my phone when I heard something else. Footsteps. Faint, careful, moving through the leaves outside my bedroom window. I froze. My blinds were half open, and I could see just enough to make out a shape moving near the tree line. Tall, slow, the white mask catching faint light from a distant porch. I dialed 911 immediately. By the time the officers arrived, whoever it was had vanished. They walked the perimeter, checked the backyard, even shined flashlights into the woods. Nothing. One of them suggested it was probably a prankster. I didn't believe that, but I nodded anyway. Before leaving, the older cop looked uneasy. He asked, "You said he was wearing a plain white mask, right?" I said yes. He exchanged a look with his partner and muttered, "You're not the first to say that tonight." Sleep didn't come easy. Every small sound made me sit up. At some point past 2 a.m., I heard the sound again, knocking, but softer this time, coming from the back door. My blood turned to ice. No one ever came to the back. It opened straight into a fenced yard. I grabbed my flashlight and crept down the hallway, every board beneath me creaking like it was warning me to turn back. When I reached the kitchen, I hesitated before looking through the glass pane in the back door. There was nothing. No figure. No mask. Just the faint reflection of my own terrified face. Then I saw it. A handprint. Pressed on the outside of the glass. Smudged, grayish, almost like ash, and too large to be normal. The next morning, I took photos and wiped it clean. I told myself it was just a Halloween prank. Some drunk kids, maybe. But that night, it happened again. Same time. Same soft knocking. Same handprint reappearing. Slightly lower this time. I called the police again. They came, looked around, saw nothing, and started suggesting I install cameras. So the next day I did. One in the front, one in the back. That night I waited. I stayed up till 2 a.m., lights off, watching the live feed on my laptop. For hours, nothing happened. Then, just as I was about to close my eyes, Motion detection triggered. My screen showed the backyard camera. And there he was, the white mask, standing directly in front of the lens. He didn't move, didn't knock. Just stood there, inches away, his head tilted sideways again. The motion alert kept pinging, as if the system couldn't decide whether he was there or not. Then the feed glitched, static burst across the screen, and when it cleared, he was gone. I replayed it over and over, trying to see where he'd gone, but the footage just cut out mid-frame. No sign of him leaving. For the next few days, nothing. I stopped checking the cameras, tried to move on, then Halloween came again. Exactly 1 year later. I didn't even decorate that time. I turned off all the lights and planned to just stay quiet until the night passed. At 9:30 p.m., I got a notification. Motion detected, front porch. My heart nearly stopped. I opened the live feed, half expecting to see him again. But it wasn't him. It was a child, maybe 8 years old, dressed in a small skeleton costume holding a pillowcase. I hesitated, then sighed. Maybe one last trick-or-treater wouldn't hurt. I grabbed a few leftover candies and opened the door. The kid was gone. The porch was empty, except for a mask. White. Blank. Sitting neatly on the welcome mat, I called the police again, but there was nothing they could do. No prints, no evidence. The mask was clean, like it had never been touched. I still live in that house, though I've replaced every lock, installed alarms, and even motion lights. But every year on Halloween night, the back camera goes dark at 2:13 a.m., exactly when the knocking used to start. And every morning after, I find a gray handprint on the outside of the door, smudged like ash, always lower than the year before, as if whoever or whatever it is getting closer to crawling inside. I grew up in a quiet New England neighborhood where everyone celebrated Halloween like it was a sacred tradition. Every house had decorations, from fake cobwebs and jack-o'-lanterns to elaborate haunted displays. Except one, it was the Carson house 3 doors down from ours. Every October, when the rest of the block turned into a glowing sea of orange lights, that house stayed dark. Curtains drawn. No pumpkins, no candy, no signs of life. When I was a kid, my mom told me, "We don't go near the Carson place on Halloween, it's bad luck." Of course, as a kid, bad luck only made me more curious. I remember the first time I really noticed it. It was Halloween night 2006. I was 10 years old, dressed as a pirate, running from house to house with my best friend Luke. Every porch was glowing, except for one. The Carson house sat at the end of the cul-de-sac, its windows dark, the lawn covered in dead leaves that no one ever raked. The path leading to the door was cracked and overgrown. Luke pointed and said, "My brother says a man died in there on Halloween night. Heart attack or something." I laughed, pretending I wasn't scared. "Then why does no one live there now?" He shrugged. "Maybe because he still does." We both laughed, but deep down I felt something wrong. Like the air near that place was colder, heavier. Even the sound of the wind changed when you walked past it. Years went by and the Carson house stayed empty. Sometimes you'd see lights flicker through the windows in the middle of the night, but when you looked closer, they'd be gone. Other times the mailman would leave letters that never got picked up. The grass grew wild. A ghost house in the middle of a living neighborhood. Then in 2018, after almost 12 years, someone finally moved in. A young couple, Emma and Darren. They seemed normal enough at first. They waved to people, cleaned up the yard, even fixed the broken shutters. The house started to look alive again, until Halloween came. It was the night of October 31st. Everyone on the street had pumpkins glowing, fake skeletons hanging, kids laughing, except their house. Once again it was dark. No candy bowl. No lights. I was 22 by then, home from college for the weekend, and something about it bothered me. They'd just moved in. Maybe they didn't know the neighborhood's Halloween tradition. So around 8:30 I decided to stop by just to say hi and maybe offer them some candy to hand out. As I walked up their path, I noticed something odd. The air felt heavy again, like years ago. The closer I got, the quieter the street became. Even the laughter from the kids seemed to fade behind me. I knocked on the door. No answer. I was about to turn away when I noticed movement through the front window. Just a flicker, a shadow passing by. I knocked again, louder this time. The porch light flicked on. I froze. Because the light wasn't warm yellow, it was deep orange, almost blood-like. And for a moment I swore I heard a whisper behind the door. Something like, "You shouldn't have come." Then the light went out. I backed away, heart pounding, and nearly ran back home. When I looked back over my shoulder, the Carson house was completely dark again. The next morning I saw Emma outside, watering her plants like nothing had happened. I asked, trying to sound casual, "Hey, I stopped by last night. I thought maybe you'd want to join the Halloween thing." She paused, smiled faintly, but there was something off about it. Her eyes didn't match the smile. "Oh, we don't celebrate Halloween," she said softly. "Not anymore." Then she turned and went inside. I grew up in a quiet New England neighborhood where everyone celebrated Halloween like it was a sacred tradition. Every house had decorations, from fake cobwebs and jack-o'-lanterns to elaborate haunted displays. Except one. It was the Carson house, 3 doors down from ours. Every October, when the rest of the block turned into a glowing sea of orange lights, that house stayed dark. Curtains drawn. No pumpkins, no candy, no signs of life. When I was a kid, my mom told me, "We don't go near the Carson place on Halloween. It's bad luck." Of course, as a kid, bad luck only made me more curious. I remember the first time I really noticed it. It was Halloween night, 2006. I was 10 years old, dressed as a pirate, running from house to house with my best friend Luke. Every porch was glowing, and except for one. The Carson house sat at the end of the cul-de-sac, its windows dark, the lawn covered in dead leaves that no one ever raked. The path leading to the door was cracked and overgrown. Luke pointed and said, "My brother says a man died in there on Halloween night. Heart attack or something." I laughed, pretending I wasn't scared. "Then why does no one live there now?" He shrugged. "Maybe because he still does." We both laughed, but deep down, I felt something wrong. Like the air near that place was colder, heavier. Even the sound of the wind changed when you walked past it. Years went by, and the Carson house stayed empty. Sometimes you'd see lights flicker through the windows in the middle of the night, but when you looked closer, they'd be gone. Other times the mailman would leave letters that never got picked up. The grass grew wild, a ghost house in the middle of a living neighborhood. Then in 2018, after almost 12 years, someone finally moved in. A young couple, Emma and Darren. They seemed normal enough at first. They waved to people, cleaned up the yard, even fixed the broken shutters. The house started to look alive again, until Halloween came. It was the night of October 31st. Everyone on the street had pumpkins glowing. Fake skeletons hanging, kids laughing, except their house. Once again, it was dark. No candy bowl, no lights. I was 22 by then, home from college for the weekend, and something about it bothered me. They just moved in. Maybe they didn't know the neighborhood's Halloween tradition. So around 8:30, I decided to stop by just to say hi and maybe offer them some candy to hand out. As I walked up their path, I noticed something odd. The air felt heavy again, like years ago. The closer I got, the quieter the street became. Even the laughter from the kids seemed to fade behind me. I knocked on the door. No answer. I was about to turn away when I noticed movement through the front window. Just a flicker, a shadow passing by. I knocked again, louder this time. The porch light flicked on. I froze, because the light wasn't warm yellow. It was deep orange, almost blood-like. And for a moment I swore I heard a whisper behind the door. Something like, "You shouldn't have come." Then the light went out. I backed away, heart pounding, and nearly ran back home. When I looked back over my shoulder, the Carson house was completely dark again. The next morning, I saw Emma outside, watering her plants like nothing had happened. I asked, trying to sound casual, "Hey, I stopped by last night. I thought maybe you'd want to join the Halloween thing." She paused, smiled faintly, but there was something off about it. Her eyes didn't match the smile. "Oh, we don't celebrate Halloween." she said softly. Not anymore. Then she turned and went inside. 2 nights later, Luke called me. He still lived nearby and his tone was shaken. You're not going to believe this, he said. The Carsons had lights on last night. Orange ones. Whole house glowing. But when I walked by today, it's empty again. Like no one's there. That didn't make sense. I'd just seen Emma that morning. I went over to check. The lawn was uncut again. The mailbox was overflowing. And when I knocked on the door, it creaked open on its own. Inside, the air was freezing cold. There was no furniture, just dust, cobwebs, and a faint smell of burnt candles. I pulled out my phone flashlight and stepped inside. On the living room wall, written in faint black soot, were the words, "Do not wake the house." I felt a vibration. My phone buzzed. Luke was calling again. "Get out," he whispered. "Get out now." Before I could ask why, my flashlight flickered, and I saw something move at the end of the hallway. It was a figure, tall, thin, completely still. No face, no eyes, just a long shape that seemed to shimmer slightly, like heat waves in the air. I stumbled backward, tripping over something on the floor. It was an old Halloween mask, a half-melted pumpkin face with blackened eyes. The hallway figure tilted its head, and I heard the faint sound of whispering again. Dozens of voices overlapping. Coming from the walls, from the floor, from the air itself, he bolted. Ran straight out the front door, across the yard, all the way home. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept my lights on, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. But around 2 a.m. my phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. "We told you not to wake the house." I threw my phone across the room. When I picked it back up, the message was gone. The next morning, the Carson house was buzzing with police cars. My mom said someone had found Emma and Darren's belongings still inside, but there was no trace of them. The neighbors said they hadn't seen the couple since Halloween night. When investigators searched the basement, they found something strange. Rows of melted candles surrounding a spot on the concrete floor where the paint had blackened, as if something had burned there. They also found an old photograph, a black and white picture of a family standing in front of the same house. The date on the back said October 31st, 1968. In the photo, the father was wearing a carved pumpkin mask, and behind the family was a faint, blurry shadow with no face. That would have been enough to keep me away forever, but 1 year later, curiosity got the better of me again. I drove by the house on Halloween night just to see. It was dark, as always. The porch sagged a little, and the windows were still covered from the inside. But as I slowed the car, I saw a faint orange glow from the upper window. I rolled down the window to listen, and I swear I heard trick-or-treating sounds.
Children's laughter.
Faint, echoing, like it was coming from another time. Then the porch light flicked on, that same deep orange color. And through the front window I saw Emma and Darren standing there, smiling, perfectly still, and behind them, dozens of faint shapes flickering in the glow, all wearing masks, all staring at the street. I sped off, heart hammering. But before I reached the end of the block, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The house lights had gone out, every single one, except the upper window, where something moved the curtain aside and watched me leave. Now, years later, the Carson house is for sale again. Every fall, someone new moves in, and every Halloween, it's dark. No decorations, no sounds, just that heavy, cold silence. But this year, I noticed something new. The real estate sign out front, it used to say for sale. Now it says welcome home. And when I drove by last night, just to check, I saw a faint orange light glowing in the window. And in the reflection of my car window, for a split second, I could have sworn I saw my own face wearing that same old pumpkin mask. Halloween night always used to be my favorite time of year. I've been running a small late-night radio show for almost 10 years now. Midnight Frequencies, a tiny independent horror station based out of Michigan. It's not big, maybe a few thousand listeners on a good night, but every Halloween we did something special. The haunted broadcast. Live calls. Scary stories. Creepy sound effects. It was my way of keeping old-school radio horror alive. This story is about the last Halloween show I ever hosted. That night started like any other. It was October 31st, around 11:45 p.m., and the studio smelled faintly of burnt coffee and old carpet. The control board lights flickered in their usual uneven rhythm. My co-host Jenny had called in sick, so it was just me, alone, in the booth. Outside the glass window, the streets were quiet. Even the trick-or-treaters had gone home. The whole town seemed wrapped in that soft, eerie silence that only happens when the last jack-o'-lantern burns low. I leaned into the mic. Good evening, Midnight Wanderers. You're tuned into the haunted broadcast, where the dead don't rest and the living shouldn't listen alone. The chat line started filling with messages. Tell the Bell Witch one again. Play the Graveyard EVP clip. Take a live call, I smiled. It felt good to have an audience. Even if it was small, these people had been tuning in for years. I queued up a low drone of thunder and creaking wood for atmosphere, took a sip of stale coffee, and hit the red button. All right, callers, the lines are open. Tell me your scariest true Halloween story. The first few calls were typical. One guy claimed his house was haunted by his late uncle. A woman said she'd seen a shadow cross her baby monitor. Entertaining, but nothing I hadn't heard before. Then around 12:37 a.m., the line went silent for almost 5 minutes. Usually that meant the system froze, so I leaned over to reset it. Before I could, a faint click came through my headset, the sound of someone picking up on the other end. At first, there was just static. Then, a voice, low, calm, almost whispering. Hello, am I on the air? I leaned forward, surprised. Yes, you are. Welcome to Midnight Frequencies. Who am I speaking with? My name is Daniel. The voice was steady but distant, like it was coming from far away. Not geographically, but beyond something. All right, Daniel, I said, trying to sound casual. You've reached our Halloween special. Got a story for us? There was a long pause. Then he said, It's not a story. It's a confession. Something in his tone made my chest tighten. The static behind his voice was rhythmic, like faint breathing. Okay, I said. You've got our attention. Go ahead. I used to live here, in Bayfield. The house by the radio tower. The one with the black shutters. That house was less than a mile from the studio. Everyone local knew it. It had been abandoned for years. I chuckled nervously. Creepy setting. Go on. I died there, I blinked. Excuse me? I said. I died there. October 31st, 2001. The hairs on my arm stood straight. I muted my mic for a moment, checked the caller ID. It showed unknown number. The timestamp flickered weirdly. 12:01, 12:01, 12:01, repeating over and over. Daniel, I said slowly, are you saying this is a prank or? You don't believe me. I didn't think you would. His voice suddenly grew faint, like he'd turned away from the receiver. You used to drive past my house every morning. On your way to the station, my stomach dropped. That was true. I took the back road every day. Past the old tower, past the boarded-up house. How would you know that? I asked. Because I've been listening. The static surged loud for a few seconds. I ripped off one ear cup, checking the monitor. The sound meter was spiking and off the scale. I turned the gain down, but it barely helped. Daniel, I said, voice shaky, if this is a joke, I don't joke anymore. I just remember, he paused. You want to know what killed me? I didn't answer. I was fixing the tower behind the house. Halloween night. Lightning hit the top while I was grounded to the base. They said it was instant, he laughed, a soft, bitter sound that fizzled into static. Instant's a lie. I remember falling. I remember hitting the mud. And I remember hearing your station playing as I died. That was impossible. Our signal didn't reach Bayfield clearly until 2004, 3 years after that date. I muted the line. My heart was pounding. Maybe some listener had done research to freak me out. But when I looked over to the soundboard, the line light was no longer red. It was white, something I'd never seen before. The log screen flickered, showing a note that shouldn't exist. Call active. Dubrero. No duration. No connection data. Just an open channel that refused to close. I tried to end it. Hit disconnect, nothing. Tried switching lines. The board crackled, then went black for half a second. When the lights returned, Daniel's voice came back too. You shouldn't have hung up. He wasn't whispering anymore. His voice filled the room even though my headset was off. Who are you? I shouted, standing now. You said it yourself. I'm Daniel. The one who listens. The computer monitor flashed. The audio waveform moved on its own, sharp peaks rhythmically pulsing. The system was recording even though I hadn't hit record. I looked at the glass window into the hallway. There was someone standing outside. At first I thought it was my reflection, but the shape wasn't right. The shoulders were slanted, the head tilted too far. The figure didn't move, just stood there facing the booth. I turned back to the console. "Daniel," I said slowly, "what do you want?" The static dropped to silence. Then he whispered, "To finish the broadcast." The red on-air light above me flickered, then turned white, same as the call button. Every speaker in the studio hissed softly, like distant wind through trees. "You've been telling stories for years," the voice said. "Now tell mine." I swallowed hard. "You said you died in 2001. What happened after?" He hesitated, then replied, "I tried to move on, but the tower keeps me. It hums at night. The frequency never stops." Then he said something that froze me. "You tuned in last week, didn't you?" I stammered, "What are you talking about?" "You drove by the house. You looked at the tower. You saw the light on in the window." I had, I remembered. I'd seen an orange flicker in the upstairs window while driving home a few nights before. Thought it was kids trespassing. "That was me," he said. "I was making sure you were listening." Every screen in the studio flickered again. The broadcast clock reset to 12:01. My heart hammered in my chest. Then, for the first time, I heard something else on the line. A faint, distant cry, like a child's voice. Then another. A chorus of whispers overlapping Daniel's words. I turned off every external input. Still, the sound continued. I grabbed my phone and started recording video as proof. The audio mixer's dials were turning on their own, sliding upward one by one until every channel was maxed. "You keep us alive," Daniel said softly. "Every time someone listens." I yanked the power cord from the wall. Sparks flew. The room went dark. For a few seconds, there was complete silence. Then, "Don't stop the broadcast." The voice wasn't coming from the headset anymore. It was coming from the walls. I don't remember running out of the studio, just the cold air hitting my face when I reached the parking lot. My car wouldn't start. I sat there shaking, staring up at the red blinking light of the radio tower behind the station. It blinked once, twice, then went white. I drove home in silence. Didn't play music. Didn't turn on the radio. I just sat there in my dark apartment until morning. The next day, I went back to the station to grab my things. The manager was there, furious. He said, "What the hell happened last night?" The entire system crashed at midnight. But here's the weird part. He pulled up the broadcast log. The show had continued. From 12 a.m. to 4 a.m., the system had streamed something. 4 hours of white noise punctuated by faint voices. Hundreds of listeners had tuned in, thinking it was some kind of experimental Halloween event. One even recorded a clip. In the middle of the static, you can clearly hear my voice say, "You're tuned in to midnight frequencies. Don't change the station." But I never said that. The FCC investigated. They said it was an electrical malfunction caused by the tower's old grounding system. But I've heard a lot of electrical interference in my time. It doesn't breathe. For weeks after, listeners sent me emails. Some claimed they'd heard faint whispers under the static, whispering their names. One man swore his radio turned itself on at midnight and tuned automatically to 93.3 FM, our frequency, even though we weren't broadcasting. And the weirdest part? The address of that old house and the one Daniel said he died in used to be 93 Tower Lane. It's been 2 years since then. I never went back on air. The station shut down after the tower was struck by lightning again last spring. Sometimes late at night I still hear it. That same faint hum, a whisper, bleeding through the silence. "You're tuned in. Don't change the station."